Hello, everyone. Welcome to our latest edition of SuperNova Commencements. I'm your host, Kashi Segal, and we are excited to have you today. We have missed you. We've been gone for a couple of weeks, but I'm happy to be back with you. And we are back with an incredible guest, as always. We only get incredible guests for you because we really care about the experiences that you're hearing about. Okay, so let's dive in. We, as always, are streaming on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and even Twitch. So I don't know if you guys are on Twitch playing games and doing things, but it's a cool platform. Happy fall. We are talking about public policy today in our Career Powered by Data segment, brought to us from our partners at Stepping Blocks. Check them out. They've got an amazing tool for you to help figure out what you want to do with your degree or your interests. They're an AI big data career platform. So really check them out. Okay, so public policy. What is it all about? The most common educational degree for a career in public policy is political science and government. There are about 25,000 people specifically in this industry, but there are lots of support roles around specifically public policy. The average age is 38. We are looking at 60% female for the industry, so that's cool. We always love finding female first industries. Top skills: public speaking, research, and nonprofit organizations. Makes sense. And then the skills that tend to make you a little bit more money when it comes to public policy: coalitions. So I guess building consensus and partnerships together. Legislation. Okay, so lobbying. And grants. And then across the country, a lot of people come from these specific schools: University of California, Berkeley, American University, and again, my alma mater, the George Washington University, and a lot of other great schools, but those are top three. Okay, so let me bring our guest on screen today because I want to dive straight in to all of her awesome wisdom. Nicole Roberts, hello, how are you?
I am laughing so hard because I didn't know what intro you were going to do, and I have a master's in public policy.
Oh, see, we do our research around here. We are all over it.
But you didn't say U Chicago. I was like, and
I did say there are a lot of other schools that do a really good job. University of Chicago is a great school. Okay, so everyone, now you can see how amazing Nicole is. She's super fun and very smart. Okay, so Nicole is executive director of Feed a Billion, and she's host of the Global Good podcast. So we're excited to have you, Nicole. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Okay, so let's kick things off. Just give us a basic idea of where you're from, where you went to school, and what you majored in.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, I was originally born in Louisiana, but I grew up mostly in Missouri, and I went to the University of Missouri for undergrad. I was biology and psychology. I thought I was going to be the greatest neuroscientist of all time. I was pre-med, and right as I graduated, or right before graduation, I absolutely panicked. And I thought, oh no, I'm going to end up in the middle of my medical school class. I'm going to be super average, and I'm going to end up writing prescriptions for the rest of my life. And so I just paused. And then, as you heard, instead, I got a master's in public policy because I took a step back and thought, if I'm not going to be the world's greatest neuroscientist or neurosurgeon, but I want to change the system and I want to think about how people behave, where can I do that? And so I went the policy route, moved all over, but one place is Washington, D.C., where I live now. And then I decided to get my doctorate and sort of combine those worlds as I see them. And I went to the University of North Carolina, the Gilling School of Global Public Health, and I became a doctor of public health.
So that seems like a varied, winding path, which is more common than people think. Students, we have heard that many times on this show. What was your career journey, career trajectory, just high level? So as you were going through education, were you working? Did you get a job after your PhD? Like, how did all that fit together? Like, how did you get to today?
Sure. Yes, I've always worked. So I was the first person in my family to go to college. So when I went, there wasn't like a big college fund for me. There wasn't a lot of planning on my family's part. So I've always worked through school, and what I did is research labs and or in the hospital. And luckily I was at great schools with big teaching hospitals. So I was always doing some kind of work in and around the school and a medical setting. So while I was getting my master's in Chicago, I worked at the Center for Neuroscience. So again, while it seems varied, I did stay sort of in these lanes. From there, I started my doctorate, and the reason I then hop around a little is because a few things happened. And I'll just be completely honest about it because life is really hard sometimes. I was in the second year or third year of my doctoral program, and I got divorced, and my dissertation chair died. And yeah, whoa, my whole world turned upside down. All of a sudden it was like, professionally, I didn't know what I was doing. Personally, I didn't know what I was doing. And I thought, well, I have this master's in public policy. I've got this background in health, and part of a doctorate in health policy and public health. And so I moved to DC, and I got a job at a think tank. And so for me, coming from academia, it was the perfect segue. It really just kind of felt like being in a campus, a research setting, just in a city. So it gave me time to adjust to DC and this new life. And then eventually I went back and did my doctorate. But at that point, my doctorate was so much more informed, so much more focused. I ended up writing a dissertation on the future of public-private partnerships. But what I did is I wrote it about the field of neuroscience in particular, just because, so again, you'll see like it seems varied, but there's these themes that sort of just constantly get pulled through. And so the work I do today is a product of all of those things. In fact, at U Chicago, it annoyed me at the time, but they always called it your toolkit. And so even when you were registering for classes and things, they would ask like, where does this fit in your toolkit? Is it something you want to get better at? Or is it a new skill set that you need to add for your future career? And so as I look at the things I've done, they allowed me, when I left the think tank, I ended up with a fellowship at the State Department for a while, which really cemented for me that I wanted to work globally. And when I left there, I did what I thought I was supposed to do, which was get a very nice job at a consulting firm. If you have or think about pursuing public policy, you will get pushed to a consulting firm at some point. For me, it didn't work very well. I'll be honest. I lasted 1 year to the day, and then I had to walk away. And that was when I went out on my own, and it was really scary, but I felt like I had all these varied tools. I had gotten a real taste for what I was passionate about, what I wanted to do. And so I started a human rights firm here in DC. And it was a bumpy few years, but it really allowed me to pursue the things that I wanted to, and to really think about how we can shape policy through using human behavior. How do people actually behave? Not some idealized world that we write a lot of our laws and things around. And we've seen that with the pandemic, right? There's how you want people to behave, and then there's how people actually behave. So anyway, catching up, I was running my firm until the pandemic, and an old mentor of mine from India had reached out, and I was helping his nonprofit at their 5-year mark sort of reorganize. And little did I know the secret plan was actually to bring me in to run the organization, which happened. And for the past year, I've been running Feed a Billion, and we feed girls all over the world. And we say it's to prevent exploitation, but that can look like anything. Girls all over are pulled from school to go work. They're married early. There are many ways that girls are not treated equally, and we want to prevent that. And food is a beautiful way to give people not only proper nutrition for brain development and body development, but emotional well-being.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so students, there was a lot in there. All right, we're going to unpack some of it, not all of it. We might need a round two for to really get to everything. But I want to just dive in. Let's go back to the beginning.
Okay.
Your thesis professor advisor died. Okay, so there are a lot of things that happen in personal life that are just hard, and it makes like dealing with the professional side of life or school or whatever hard.
Mm-hmm.
But when something happens that you can't control like that, how do you even begin to figure out how to move forward from there? How do you pick yourself up from a professional blow like that?
I mean, that couple year window, and I really do mean couple year window, like it was just full of loss, and I was lost. I'll be every time I thought I had figured it out or I had moved on, like I'd literally get to 6 months and I'd be like, oh, I did not have it together, but I do now, right? And then 6 months later, I'd be like, nope, still didn't have it together. I mean, it was really difficult. And what I did is, as I said, I had a job at a think tank in DC. And in fact, the guy who started and was running the think tank did not know any of those things. I buried myself in the work, and all of a sudden I was single in a new city, and I just worked my ass off is what I did. And it wasn't until a couple years later that he and I were out at a meeting of some sort, and I said something about like, oh, when I got divorced and my chair did, and he was like, wait, what? Like I really just like put blinders on and threw myself into work. It isn't necessarily the best coping strategy, but I kind of emotionally shut down, to be honest. Like there was too much to process, and those couple years, it was certainly not my best me, but I think that's just part of life. And I certainly now, there's lots of professional hiccups of different scope and scale, but I think what I really took away from that time was that I'm resilient. Mm-hmm. And that sometimes you do just have to kind of put your head down and keep going, because it will get better. You just have to work through like a place in life or a phase. I've even told a couple people I've mentored over the years when they've hated like the program they're in. And I'm like, you're 6 months from graduation. Like, yes, pursue your dreams, but also just suck it up and keep going. Like you're so close. And having stopped and then restarted a program like a doctor, like I also am like, let me tell you what it's like to start all over a second time. Like even in the hard times, keep going if you can.
Yeah. So, did you have a job lined up before you went to DC, or did you just like go? You just went.
I just went. I did have a couple of really good prospects. Like as I volunteered, like I was getting divorced, so I knew I had to move. We were going to sell the house, so it was like, do I move and get an apartment here and then maybe go there? So it was sort of like two things were working in tandem for me, which is a little different than a lot of people. And it was like, look, I have to, I'm packing boxes and I have to sign a lease somewhere. I know, at least at that point, I was like, I know DC is where I want to give it a go for really trying to make a difference. So I might as well, move. But I was frantically at that time setting up interviews. And as I said, the one area I got really lucky is that the person I worked for, he he was like a 60-year-old economist, and because it was a think tank setting, it had so many parallels to my doctoral program. It was almost like he didn't know it at the time, but it was like he stepped in as my chair in a way. They had the same personality. They were both PhDs in economics. So I won't make comments on personality types, but they had very similar old economist personality. But it was great for me because there was then a little bit of consistency and comfort, because there obviously wasn't in any other aspect.
Yeah. So you did public policy as your master's. Have you used that through your career? Is that something that has helped you indirectly, directly? How has it shown up?
It shows up a lot of ways, but they're smaller, if that makes sense. So I actually wrote it down as you were talking. So I was like, public speaking. Yep, I do that all the time. I obviously run a nonprofit, which I've also done in the past. I wrote my dissertation. You said coalitions, like I've worked for them, and I wrote a book on public-private partnerships. So coalition building. And I have been a part of
See,
it.
the research is good, you guys. The research is good. All right. Stepping Blocks knows what they're talking about.
Yes, I did. I wrote it down as you were talking. That's why I was laughing when you turned the camera on. And legislatively, I live in DC. So here I would say I used to be more politically involved. Um, it's been a weird few years in DC, and I'm less politically involved than I used to be. I think a lot of us who live here are, I don't want to say burnt out, but a lot of what we thought about how government does and should function doesn't quite ring true in the same ways in the last few years. And so I have decided a more subtle and soft approach. And so when you ask, like, how does public policy come through? Well, for one, like running Feed a Billion, I don't have a background in nutrition. And yet, all of a sudden, I can tell you all kinds of things about our WIC program, our SNAP program, how food gets to people. I have friends like you, right, who also help me understand, like, where is waste in our various systems? How can we make things better? And then because I live in DC, I've worked with all these senators and the White House, and I was at State Department. I have the ear of a lot of these people, and you would be really surprised at how something as simple as a coffee can completely change what's going on or where someone's focused. And that coalition building is an absolute skill set that I never really appreciated at U Chicago. And there are things all the time that it won't even be until later, and I'm like, oh yeah, that was actually something I learned. Like, it's not just an innate skill to know who to plug in where and network with and influence in subtle ways, or even through like a report. You can pull nutrition facts, food insecurity, and share it with someone, and all of a sudden they take up your cause. And so, that doesn't look like a lobbyist. It doesn't look like a think tank applying pressure on someone's voting, but it can very much change the conversations had and the way we think about changing our systems.
How did you just hit on such an important point, building partnerships and building relationships, really. It's something we talk about a lot. How do you practice that and hone that skill? How would a student go about honing that skill? It's such an important one.
Really good question. One way is to network, get out there. And I am totally one of those people, so I empathize with others who are, that like when I'm in it, I'm in it. And I'm just go, go, go. When my head is like not in it or there's something else going on, I can't imagine anything more miserable than networking and trying to be like, yeah, I'm this, I do that. Hey, it's like somehow like sucks all the energy out of you. But any opportunity you can, take advantage of meeting people, and then secondarily give. And what I mean by give is, well, I have an example actually. I believe that if you combine the right couple people, like an introduction, 1 and 1 can make 50. Like I've literally seen people get introduced and new companies have come from their different skill sets or their complementary ways of thinking. In my particular case, there's someone, I made a couple introductions for this man years ago. I thought he and his wife completely forgot I existed. And 5 years after I made some introductions for them, they called and said, hey, National Geographic approached us about this thing, and you were the person that came to mind. Would you want to, whatever? And they opened up this incredible door for me. But 5 years had gone by since I opened a door for them. And it really, for me, drove home the point that, like, by just giving, and by, in this case, giving was saying, I think something really special could come from you meeting this other person. Let me make sure that you two are positioned to meet. Mm-hmm. It came back tenfold, but it took 5 years. But I also knew then, all of a sudden, I realized these people that I thought didn't even know my name and forgotten that I existed had actually just been watching from afar. They had seen on LinkedIn what I was doing, where I had moved. They had heard from so and so that I was doing this thing. And it also then spoke to me about being really consistent in my, I feel cheesy calling it a brand, but I was a young woman who started my own company. And it also drove home for me that at all times, my actions and words represented the organization, and the organization's actions and impact also reflected on how the world saw me. Mm-hmm. And luckily in this case, it worked out really well. But
yeah, I would say so.
But it reiterated to me, like, people are paying attention, even when you don't know that they are. Mm-hmm. And when you've done something kind and you don't ask for anything in return, you really do it genuinely and authentically, people remember.
So, okay. I want to hit on that point too, but let's talk about you starting your own business, because that's hard. What prompted you to take the plunge and start your own business? What were you thinking?
Well, don't ever do what I did. So what I did, but if you're listening, don't do what I did. I just quit my job and woke up the next day and went, holy shit, I don't have to pay rent or mortgage. Like, I've got to do something. It had come at the end of, I had said, the consulting firm. I had done 1 year, and it was so hard to leave. The last place I was for this fellowship thing was like Bangladesh and some other places. And I come back, and all of a sudden I put on a suit, and I had to basically go sit in like a cubicle, it was a glorified cubicle every day. And they had me making PowerPoints for major hospitals, and I was presenting to their board with a team. I mean, it was very much consulting firm, right? But there was a night right around that 1 year mark where I knew I couldn't keep doing it. I have no problem admitting, I think the last 2 months I went into that job, like, I'd get on the train in the morning and it'd be like a tear, like a secret. Like, I was headed in the direction of this place, and I physically was just like, I can't believe I have to go do this for like 8 hours today. But then there was one specific night I was tasked with finding the same color blue to match the logo of the hospital we were presenting to. And I don't know what happened, but like the whole presentation got messed up. The blues in the font didn't match. And it's like 3 a.m. and I'm trying to find the right color code for a font. Like, and I just thought, this is not what I'm supposed to be doing with my life. 1 year ago, I was in like working in these clinics and hospitals and like all over. And oh my gosh, I basically just, I was like, I can't do this. I just can't. And it was really wild. And I've heard other people say when you start your own business or side hustle, you reach a point at like where the things shift, the scale shifts, and not living your purpose or whatever you believe you're supposed to be doing, it becomes so consuming that everything else feels like it's keeping you away from what you're supposed to do. And for me, there was just, it wasn't even a shift of scale. It was just like a light switch. Like something just flipped and I'm like, I can't. So I knew I cared about two things really. Human rights, like basic human rights. And I cared about healthcare. It's what I wanted to do, whatever that looked like. And by pure accident, I Googled around. There was not a health and human rights like company in the way I envisioned it. And no one had purchased like health and human rights as the name of a company. So I just bought it for like $8, set up the website, and it's purple. It's still purple because it was my favorite color. That's literally how it came together.
Purple is also my favorite color.
Nice. Yeah, there was no brand strategy. There was no financial plan. And those first couple months were terrifying. I took on every tiny, small project I could. I was ghostwriting for people. So I even went back to some of those hospitals that I had done some consulting work for. And I said, I know what you need done. The consulting firm's going to charge you $40,000. If you'll pay me like $150 a blog post, I'll do it for you. And they trusted me to do. I mean, those first few months, I piecemealed every dollar together. The next couple of years were better, but not a ton, I'll be honest. But it gets back to the last sort of thing I was talking about. I also realized starting anything in healthcare, but a human rights firm in particular, I couldn't just pop up and be like, I care about people. And everyone was going to trust me, believe in me. And so I knew when I started, it was going to be a tough few years because I had to prove my beliefs. I had to prove my work ethic. And I had to show successes. It was really tough. And yet I will say it is also so rewarding. To be your own boss and to, from that point on, I don't know that I've ever been up working at 3 a.m. again where I didn't fully believe in what I was doing.
Yeah.
That's okay. I'm fine being tired if I'm tired for the right reasons. Like I was up working for the right things. So yeah, it's a completely different headspace to live in. And once you get a taste of it, it's really hard to go back.
Yeah. Well, I think what you said goes back to that personal brand that you have been building over the course of your career and through the people that you're meeting and networking with, that yes, it's hard to establish yourself as your own independent business, but people trusted you because that personal brand that you brought with you of integrity and work ethic and all the things shown through. And so that's one of the reasons that personal brand is so important. And you can take a misstep and repair it, but that's hard, right?
It is. And it's also hard. One thing I've learned is when you do touch different areas like I have, people often pigeonhole you as the thing they know you for. So I've written for Forbes. Obviously I write healthcare, right? Like again, it's super in my lane, and because of my network and whatnot, I can write about it. It's awesome. But I still go places and I'm the Forbes girl. And like I literally had people call me that, and I'm like, that's not what I do for a living. Like, I just happen to write an article here and there when there's something really relevant to the world of like food security. And to other people, I'm this, I'm the feed a billion girl now. I'm the whatever woman, or it can be hard to build a consistent brand for yourself, even when you now sort of do it all the time. So don't get frustrated if people tend to put you in a, I mean, it's what we do mentally, right? We meet someone, we make first impressions immediately, we put them in a bucket of sorts, and they always sort of live in that bucket, even if they move. And so, it is hard, and it takes a long time. It takes consistency, and you won't always get it right, but you do the best you can.
Yeah. What would you say? You've talked about purpose and really understanding what drives you. What would you say your purpose is? And how did you figure it out?
So I have a couple words. I think connection is one of mine, and communication is another. And so, what is my purpose? My heart is happiest. So when I think of my purpose, I think of like, what would I do even if no one paid me, even if like it, killed me? I think connecting people and communicating with people, which I know sounds really vague, but it comes across in a lot of ways, which is, again, like I said, I gave that example earlier of like, I met someone and I knew they had to meet this other person. Some awesome stuff, including a company, came out of it. And I can be like, I did that. Like, it's not my company. No one even knows. But I'm like, I know how that company got started, and I did that. I put those people in the same room and said, you have to talk about X, Y, and Z. And that made my heart so happy. I love connecting people and watch them like flourish and just grow. And the communication part is, I love getting people to understand or be curious about things. And so right now, it's part of why we have a podcast. I want to connect people to all these other people around the world who are doing good. And I'm doing it through a medium that's a video and audio podcast. I never, in a million years, I've never wanted to start a podcast. I don't even like doing a lot of podcasts.
Well, we're happy you're here on this one.
I see the importance of it's a way to connect and communicate with people all over. And so for me, yeah, I think my purpose is really, it has something to do with connecting and communicating, and it doesn't have a definite or defined like job description. It doesn't have a lot of constraints to it, because I feel like I can be living in my purpose in lots of different ways, as long as I'm helping to make the world better. And sometimes that's by bringing other people together and saying, go forth and make the world better. And other times it's by saying, here are tangible ways we can protect children or provide clean water, or provide food, whatever that is.
Mm-hmm. How do you become the Forbes girl? Like, Forbes is a big publication, and I know a lot of people who would want to write for someone like Forbes or another big publication. How do you even get into that world where you're writing for such a big magazine?
It was an accident on my part. But back to something we talked about earlier on, which is an opportunity presented itself, and I just ran headfirst into it, and then figured it out later. I was in DC. It was around the time the Affordable Care Act was passing. Yes. And it started at a dinner in which someone was going to testify on the Hill, and they had asked for some health, big air quotes, right, experts to weigh in. And so, a lot of people were really into like the language of the bill and how it would financially do this and that. again, I was much more big picture, like, what does this mean for actual humans? How are they going to behave? Are they going to drop coverage? Are they going to, and so as that conversation went on, there was a guy who writes for Forbes, and he actually reached back out and said, hey, as this healthcare bill is moving forward, we could use a couple of strong voices who understand what's going on and can communicate it in a way that people understand, because they're not going to read, thousands and thousands of legal jargon. And so that was it. And they also were looking, I think, to, again, big air quotes, diversify a little. I think they realized they just had a bunch of, or mostly white men writing, and they were looking for different perspectives. So I guess I checked at least the gender box or something. I don't know.
Get in how you can.
Right. So it just sort of was someone was like, hey, would you want to? And I'll tell you, my first couple articles, I cannot believe they let me stay on as a contributor. I had never written outside of academia. So I basically published footnoted journal article submissions. They were so dry. And someone even said, they're like, have you ever written a blog before? And I was like, mm-mm. Like, yeah, how about you find a voice that's not I literally structured
technical writing,
like a journal submission, and I had footnote. They're like, you can just hyperlink to it. I was so naive about it. But Forbes was patient, and they put on lots of these sort of writer workshop things. Never in a million years did I think of myself as a writer at all. I now find a lot of joy in it, because when I get really excited about something or I'm really interested, I can tell other people about it. And that's my goal with Forbes in particular. My dad was a fireman, and I've always said, what I want to do is take complex things, because health care can be really hard, and feed a billion. I want to be able to explain to someone very simply how providing food can enable a girl to go to school and then, have an opportunity to live up to her potential. And if I can write those really hard global things in a way that my dad reads it and goes, I didn't know that. And then he can go to the fire department and be like, hey, did you guys know? To me, that's a wide success. Yeah. So, when it comes to places like Forbes, I think the other thing for people to know now is the writing world has changed. And that was just 10 years ago. But the contributor models have expanded. So there's a lot more people that are writing one-offs, as opposed to having staff writers who write, a weekly column type thing. The way the internet and writing models have changed is just so different now. It is really hard to get above the noise unless you are sort of an expert in an area, and they need that area. The pandemic is a good example. Excuse me. We now have a lot more health writers than we used to, and everyone does. Well, all of a sudden, the world presented us with something where we needed people who understood epidemiology. We needed people who understood how vaccines are made. There are lots of people who were then given an opportunity to use their voice in a way that they hadn't been before, and maybe they wanted to, maybe they didn't. But, I think writing and speaking as skill sets will never steer you wrong, because you never know when you can offer up your services. You can, especially in writing, don't think you're going to make a lot of money getting paid to do it. You won't.
Yeah, but it's to the point that you made before, and I want to pull out a few things that you just noted. It's a good way to build a personal brand, because you may not get a lot of money for your writing. There's some people who make it big, but it's valuable in so many other ways. You can really create that personal brand for yourself and be that person that people trust when they see something you write come out. The other thing is, if you're not a writer, it's okay, because there are all kinds of like help, like workshops online, and I'm sure there are YouTube videos on how to write a better story, you know, like check them out, because there are so many resources out there for you to get better at whatever it is you think that's going to help you that might be standing in your way. Just do it, try it.
And figure out what you're good at. I can tell you it'll take me days to try and write an article if I'm not approaching it in a way that makes sense to me. And you'll find a lot of what makes sense to me, now that you've all heard about my background, is looking at, like, I have multiple articles that start with like the psychology of whatever it is. And last year I wrote one on like the psychology of pandemics and like riots, like what's happening. In every pandemic in history, there are riots. Why? Like, but for me, it was super easy to write because I'm like, what's happening here is predictable because of our brains. Here's how they process this information. Here's how they behave on the back end. Super simple, wasn't long, and yet got a ton of traction because it was like me talking about what I cared about and doing it in a way that made sense to me. So it was easy. Lots of people like to read and write bullet sort of lists. And as much as I don't think that's like wonderful journalism, a lot of times we're just trying to say, like, here's what something is, here's what you need to know. And it also makes it easier for the reader, especially now that we do everything on our phones. You know, it's like, what do I need to know? Just tell me what I need to know. So there's lots of writing workshops, speaking workshops, but also figure out what feels right to you, because if you keep trying to make yourself something you're not, it's so much harder. And there's a room for all of us in our different ways of communicating.
Yep. And your perspective is valuable. You may not know that, but it makes what you write interesting.
Yes. And there are so many people like you, or that think the way you do, or are interested in what you're interested in. It can take a long time to build up, you know, some traction and get credit, but it's definitely worth pursuing.
Yep. All right. So last question for me, because we have actually a lot of student questions coming in.
Okay.
How do you feed 1 billion people?
So in our it looks like a lot of different models. So for example, in Kenya, it looks like building a kitchen on a school. The school is already doing wonderful things, operating, and what happens is then, you know, all of a sudden local people are hired, local food and resources are used. But in the morning, when the smokestacks start, the girls come running, and it helps us. Basically, what we're doing is incentivizing them to go to school and their families to send them to school. They know they'll get fed and educated. In the US, we have a couple different partnerships. It looks like even handing out Thanksgiving meals, right, at different times to people in need. It looks like partnering with schools. Because we focus primarily on girls, the model I love to talk about is the one we primarily use in India and other really low resource communities. And it looks like a protein shake, which isn't as sexy, I know, as a hot meal of roti and other things. But we found, unfortunately, in some of our communities, that when we provide a girl with a hot meal, her family would actually take a meal away and distribute it amongst the other children. We weren't trying to substitute. We're trying to make sure she's getting everything she needs. So what we did is we partnered with Blend Hub, a big multinational company, and we brought in nutritionists and all kinds of people to build the optimal formulas for a growing girl's brain and body. And so, I mean, they're literally packets like this. I have some somewhere around here in the room. So we just got a whole bunch more. And we can make them for $1. $1 literally equals one meal a girl can tear, pour, shake it up, drink it, and we at least know she has all the nutrients she needs for the day. And so it's a different way of thinking about nutrition and food. And like I say, it's not as sexy as a big, beautiful plate of food, but in certain settings, it is absolutely the way that we can provide literally millions of people a day, girls in our case is what we focus on, with the nutrition that they need.
This is a perfect example of being focused on the outcome and the goals and not being tied to the way in which you get there. That's true for like achieving something at a company. It's true for achieving something in life. You may not know how you're going to achieve that goal, but if you just keep trying from all angles, it might look different, but you're still going to hit the goal.
And something I bring up on the podcast when I interview people is I actually have sort of a built-in question somewhere in there about like what went wrong. And it's because I truly believe no one doing like remarkable work is doing what they originally set out to do. Like there have been twists and turns and pivots and things were upside down. Like there's nothing honestly more powerful than saying like, I don't know, or we learned.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that's where the real good stuff happens. Because if you
Yeah.
go in thinking, I have the answers, I know everything, you're not only going to screw up, you're likely going to do things that aren't the best for the communities that you're trying to help.
Yeah.
They're the experts, not you.
Yeah.
You're
Totally
facilitating.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go to student questions. There are a lot of them. Okay.
Try and be really quick.
All right. So Greg wants to know, are you surprised by anything at your job or with the work that you're doing?
Both good and bad. I am still surprised by people all the time. So like the example I just gave, the idea that when we provided food, people took food away from their children shocked the hell out of me. I never in a million years would have thought that was an outcome. And yet, once we understood what was happening and how low resources were, we understood. But yeah, there are things all the time that I just stop and go, I did not see that coming. And sometimes they're for the good, right? Sometimes people, when given an opportunity, will do really awesome things.
Mm-hmm. That's true. Carlo wants to know, what is the favorite part of your job?
It's a good question. It's not the logistics. I hate logistics. Sorry. When things get done, and that may sound kind of silly, but like I know in certain cases, like when we need to get food someplace, I don't care how many trucks it takes. I don't care which driver drives which truck. That logistic stuff does not matter to me. And thank goodness we have really smart people who handle that. Like when something needs to get done and it gets done, it is so cool. There is nothing better than even getting a text saying like food's received, or every now and then we'll have like a video from like one of the girls that's like, thank you. And she's got her, and I'm like, awesome. It's really fun.
Yeah, that's great. Addie wants to know, what would you say is your greatest strength and how has it helped you?
I have no idea. I'm really passionate. When I care like to a fault. But working, that has enabled me to work in the fields and areas that I do, because you can't day in and day out do things like try and feed children without getting really tired and worn down. So passion will take you a really long way when you're out of energy.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And like pay attention to where your natural curiosity is taking you, because generally that's probably where your passions are going.
Yes. Yeah, that's an excellent point.
Yeah. Laurel wants to know, how do you stay motivated when you are working on such tough world problems?
It can be really hard. And I definitely go through these like ebbs and flows, and I'm in one of the like lower ones right now, and I can feel it. And I've been here, and it's just because we've got family stuff going on. Our products have been delayed Our next batch, for $25,000, we can make 2.5 metric tons. And we were supposed to have an event in September with multiple people writing big checks. I really thought we were going to be able to send product like this week to schools all over to help them get going again for the fall. Because we actually have places that can't open until there's, they can feed children. Those kinds of, even just what seemed like a 2 to 4 weeks setback or delay, I mean, they really take like the wind out of your sails. And, but I'm also a human. So, some days I'm like literally upset because I'm thinking, oh my God, children aren't going to eat. Like, what am I doing? Right. And then I also get really frustrated with my husband over stupid things like how he loads the dishwasher. So sometimes you can step back and have perspective of like, okay, the dishwasher doesn't really matter. But other times you're a human, and I don't know why he does what he does. It's so silly.
Yeah.
But
at least he loads it.
Yeah, fair enough. But it can be really hard. And it just, like I said, you got to ride out the low times. And sometimes it just takes one little victory that you can sort of attach to, and it'll help pull you out.
This is funny, kind of. So Des wants to know, so what went wrong? I guess.
Well, lots of things have gone.
Turning it around.
Yeah, lots of things have gone. At present, I think for us, that example I gave of pivoting to, in a lot of countries, pivoting to this shake model, that has been huge for us, because when you spend years trying to provide hot meals and deliver, to all of a sudden say, we're going to move to powder, like, and it's because it went wrong. Like, people were taking meals away from their children. So we had to come up with something completely different and new. And there are still days where I'm like, but it's a shake. And then I have to, stop and think, like, but it's a shake. How cool is that? Mm-hmm. We can actually keep someone healthy by a shake. It completely changes the way that you think about how we get nutrition, how we move products, what goes into it, how basic it is. Like, it's so simple. It's really that simple. But it took a lot of things going wrong, and I have no doubt we'll have more delays. I mean, like the one we're in right now, we had to cancel our in-person event, and that was going to be a huge fundraiser. So right now what's wrong is we have a lot of people we need to feed, and our production is delayed. So
yeah. Oh, that's hard. Okay, so Stacy said you mentioned mentors. How do you find a mentor?
That's a very good question. I would look for people who, whether, I always encourage people to stop thinking about a defined like job description, but I also realize when you're looking for jobs, like, that's how you do it. But I would find someone who generally does something that you think just seems like absolutely what you want to do. And what I mean when I say like a job description is, it's not that you find a person who's the VP of X at Y and you're like, I want to be the VP of X at Y. It's more like, I see this woman who's running an organization that feeds kids, but she's running a nonprofit like a business, and they're expanding into other countries because they literally are like selling product, feed people. Like, I think it'd be cool to run a business that focuses on like children or something, right? So it's a lot more loose, but you see someone doing something, you're like, I would really enjoy something like that. Mm-hmm. And you'd be surprised if you even just cold email. There's one person I mentor, and I'll give her all the credit in the world. She was very upfront, and I got this email and she just said, my name is, I'm really interested in you doing this. I heard you at whatever, And if you will agree to be my mentor, I promise I will only bug you once a quarter. And in fact, we can set them up now. And she put in like time options for me.
That is very organized.
She was like, if we could do, it was right around the new year. And it was something like, if we could do like January, April, blah, 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 blah. Let's do like the 3rd of every month, you know, between like 1 and 2 p.m. Eastern, if that works for you. And for whatever, I was like, I mean, at least I know what I'm committing to. I was so impressed. And she's delightful. And she's done a master's degree and a super cool job since then. And yeah, once we talked about just apartment hunting, she was so stressed. You know, our whole phone call went into like, I'm moving. What do I do? How do I find this place? Should I actually live with my parents and save some money? Should I? And other times they're very job focused. They're very whatever. But yeah, before that, I don't think I would have been so supportive of like just cold email someone. But after that, I was like, it worked. Mm-hmm. And she made it very clear what she needed from a mentorship and a relationship. And she made it easy for me of like, here's what I need you to give. Okay. It was awesome. So.
You also have a huge leg up as a student to be able to say, yes, I'm looking for a mentor. You can be that upfront about it. Everybody wants to help a student, right? So like get them in now, and then like you'll practice like establishing those relationships, right? And as you move through your career, you'll get better at finding them. Start with one.
Start with one. Yeah. And then always in that same vein, you know, give back, because you are now in a place that someone else wants to be someday. Right. Mm-hmm. And so even like, I can tell you, no one in my family had ever gone to college before me. I would have given anything to even have someone in undergrad talk to me about like what it's like, what you're getting into. Yeah. It's super simple, but that can do a lot for another person. So no matter where you are in the process, there are people doing stuff you'd like to do. There's also people who, you know, want to do the stuff you're doing. So mentorship,
such a great point,
can go more than one direction.
Absolutely. Super great point. All right. A few more. All right. Shanice would like to know, how will Corona continue to affect your work?
I mean, well, we're going to have to learn, obviously, how to deal with it and live with things. Travel has been the biggest problem and will continue to be. Setting up new partnerships internationally is near impossible when you cannot meet with someone. I've got applications from schools, orphanages, whatever, all over the world, literally. And I don't know who they are. And it's not like I can go visit and I can see, oh, this is a school with 30 children.
Yeah.
Sure. Once every 6 months we can, or this is a scam or something in between. Like this is a really loosey goose thing that we can't, you know, it is so hard. It's hard to grow. It's hard to build trust when you're not face to face. And that, I think, is unfortunately going to continue for a while, because we're going to see ebbs and flows all over the world, especially if new variants come out. And given the places that we work and need us the most, they're going to get hit so much harder. So it's going to continue to just be a nightmare to try and travel to the places we need to be.
Yep. All right. Last question. I always like this question. What is the best piece of advice you've ever been given? And that's Kellyanne.
I have no idea. I think it'd have to be, and I can think of who sort of said it, and I won't say it the way she said it, but it was, and it's so cheesy, but it's about being like true to yourself. Because I remember being, when I was living in Chicago at one point, saying like, I want to do this, but I also kind of want to do this. And it was, I was struggling with like, there's no job that does all the things I want to do. And I was stuck in that place. It was right after my master's, not long after my master's degree. And so I was still very much stuck in like a job description. I needed to find the right job. And I couldn't find anyone that had like a description. I'm like, that's what I want to do. And this woman that was my boss, I was asking her for some advice, and she said something about like, be true to yourself. Like, there may not be a job. You may have to write your own job description, as long as you keep sticking with what you're supposed to be doing. It will figure itself out, and it has. I'm really lucky to feel, even on my worst days, like, and I feel like I'm making no traction and I'm not having an impact, I have to kind of pause and go, I am, and I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing.
That's great.
Yeah. So really be comfortable with yourself. Be honest with yourself.
Yeah.
And sorry, the last thing I would add in a similar like way of thinking, especially if you're in school, this is a time to learn what you don't want to do. Don't like that year in that consulting firm showed me the way I never wanted to run a business, the way I never wanted to approach the world or the people in it. It's horrible, but
it's good though.
But I learned what I didn't want to do. And there are so many hospital jobs or consulting jobs or government jobs I would have pursued or gone after had I not learned that lesson when I did. And so in retrospect, it was one of the most fruitful years of my life. I hated every moment of it in the office part. But I learned so much that year. Like, it really has an important place. So you're in a position right now to figure out what you don't want to do. And it'll help, but pay attention, because it'll help you figure out what you do want to do.
Yeah. So much of what Nicole has talked about today has been about channeling how you're feeling into something more positive. And that's possible. You just have to want to do it. And it's hard, but it's possible. Nicole, thank you so much for being here today. We are way over and way out of time. Students, we have a website. You know this, but I'm going to remind you, it's supernovacommemncements.com. Please go there. If you're not signed up for the mailing list, please sign up. We send you really cool things, scholarships, grants, opportunities, internships. You only get it if you're on the mailing list, so please sign up. We are everywhere on the web at #SuperNova Commencements, super easy to find. Nicole, do you have any parting thoughts for our students before we sign off?
No, reach out, say hi. I'm pretty easy to find. I recently got married, so it's Nicole Roberts, but on Twitter, it's still Nicole Fisher, I think. I'm pretty sure it's still Nick Fisher.
We'll link. Yeah,
I'm easy to find. Find me, send me a note. And every now and then at Feed a Billion, we also have internships. So be sure to, just follow me or the podcast or Feed a Billion and stay in the loop.
Great. We will link to all of that in the show notes. So students, have a great week and make the most of this unique time. I think most of you are back in person. So I guess yay for that. And remember, it's a blessing to be a blessing. So be kind to people today as you go through your day. Stay safe and healthy, and we'll see you next time. Bye.